Who is the wisest person in all of Groo the Wanderer? Most people would immediately say the sage. I would say something different. Hi, I'm Darren, these are my hands, and this is GrooTube, where we appreciate the art of Sergio Aragonés. Okay, that intro was a bit of a red herring. I'm not actually going to talk about how wise or foolish I think the sage is. My focus today is the sage from the very early days until today and how he has changed over the years. Oh no, I hit my Pacific Comics Groo #1. And I'm not talking about how his character or his wisdom has changed. I'm talking about how Sergio's drawing style has changed. So let's clean up this mess and get into it. Although the sage doesn't show up proper in a Groo story until Pacific Comics issue #4, The Turn of the Wheel, there are mini sage stories in these Pacific Groos, and the first one is in issue #1. So let's take a look at the sage in issue #1 of Pacific Comics Groo the Wanderer. Wild Animals featuring Scott Shaw, Sergio Aragonés, and more. Okay, so in the very beginning, he roamed all about the land in a day gone by, and they called him the Sage. And he was not a calm, collected, well-put-together old man. He's like a bug-eyed crazy person here. Take a look at the Sage. His eyes are big and round and bulgy. His tongue is dangling out. His beard is really scruffy looking, and his mustache, well, it just doesn't seem to be big and luscious. When we see him down here, I guess it's part of his beard, but it's interesting to see his mouth, the corners of his mouth behind it. Look how it's not even attached over here. Lots and lots of loose whiskers. And you'd be forgiven if you thought that Sergio was actually drawing the sage's mustache as individual hairs. His forehead is wrinkly. I don't know. It looks like he's maybe missing teeth even here. How about there? Maybe those are teeth there. Maybe that's supposed to indicate that his lips are curling in over his gums. How about there and there? Yeah, maybe a couple little teeth down there. But he's just really showing his age. He's weathered. He's a rough sage. This is probably not the sage that you think of when you think of the ideal sage. And who is this dog traveling with him? Certainly doesn't look like the dog that we come to know as Mulch. 1982, the first sage. A rough, scraggly, whiskery, wrinkly, bulgy-eyed, toothless old man. About 3 years later, in Epic #7, reintroducing the Sage. And man, he's looking different already on the cover. That mustache is big and fluffy and forms part of his beard, part of his front lower face. His mouth is a part of the beard-mustache combo here. He's still got some wrinkles on his forehead, but he's looking smoother. He's looking more together in this incarnation, in this reintroduction. Let's take a look inside. In a day gone by, he roamed the land dispensing his wisdom. He was the sage. So he's still got round eyes here, but they're definitely not bulgy. There's that fluffy beard. The wrinkles seem to be gone. The whiskery mustache seems to be replaced by the wings of a cloud. He's definitely got some teeth going on up here and down here. His lips do not seem to be curling in on his gums. And his beard is not made up of as many, locks, strands, shreds of hair. It's starting to come together in more of a fluffy, sweeping kind of look. When I taught myself how to draw the sage, I used this drawing down here in the corner as my model, and I noted that his man bun was about the same diameter, at least, as his head, and that his nose in length was also about the same diameter as his head. Is it just the coloring of the doggy here that has changed? He's not that Tan brown, he's definitely a red spotted dog here. The shag has gone a little bit. Yeah, this is looking like Mulch now, eh? Issues 34, 35, and 36. Kind of the Amulet miniseries here. Features a lot of sage. Let's take a look at him on the cover here. Even from comparing a couple years back, this is 1987, this is 1985. The line work in his hair and man bun, it's not as scratchy, haphazard. It's just giving some defined shape. Sergio is drawing those lines where he wants them to be. Yes, he's drawing the lines where he wants them to be here, and he wants them to be bushy and hairy and scritchy-scratchy. Not so much over here. A nice big floppy nose, the lovely wings of a mustache and fluffy beard. Cartoony-looking sage. Let's take a look inside. Always got to take a moment to stop and appreciate the Groo fish. But here's a page with a lot of good sage on it. I think the sage's costume, at least from his first appearance in Pacific Comics #1 Sage Story, I think his costume is really kind of lengthened. We're not seeing as much of the shin as we were seeing in the very, very early days. When I look at the sage here, I see a nice cartoony drawing of him. Interesting that his beard here isn't so defined in its edges. You know, Sergio's drawing these tufts of hair that kind of point down, but here it's more like a puffy, fluffy cloud. Look at the size of the wings of his mustache. And generally, his mouth is integrated into the beard-mustache combo. Sometimes it's a little separated. Big-time teeth, no wrinkles, large expressive eyes. Very interesting here. You know, the sage isn't a Merlin-type character. He's not a wizard. He's just a wise man. He's the sage. I'm sure if anybody in the Groo universe, the Grooniverse, could learn magic, the sage could do it. But he doesn't. And here we have the sage using magic. By the power of the amulet, I command the wizard and all his evil minions to disappear from this realm. Bye-bye. So it's quite unique to see the sage wielding magical powers here. Again, we see the bun is about the same diameter as the head. I think the nose is still about that length. I often like to imagine a line drawn from the back of the bun to the tip of the nose of the sage, just kind of coming down here, almost bisecting the sphere of the head. Got it happening there as well. Let's take a look at issues 35 and 36 as well. Bit of a cloud of a mustache. He doesn't have those bulgy outy eyes, even when Sergio does draw them as circles. Mulch is definitely becoming mulchy mulch. Hang on for a second. By the way, Sage, what is your dog's name? Mulch. Can you define that? Don't ask. What a look. King Sage, from the benevolent ruler of the town to the king of the entire country, the king of the world. Look at his brow. Look at his fulsome beard and mustache. Getting a little bit exasperated here in the picture, and it shows in his beard and mustache. It's not fluffy, puffy wings. It's getting a little frazzled. Ploof. Frozen, melting, exasperated. Look at those eyeballs. Every once in a while, Sergio draws the sage's nostril, just poking out above the mustache there. Full mouth of teeth down here. His jaw is strong. None of that toothless or one or two tooth smile sage that we had in the early days. We've got to take a look at the image from Groo 36. Here we are. Give me the amulet, you idiot! With the hidden message, with the Groo crew, with so many of our favorite characters here. And just want to point out a couple things here. The dynamic pose that Sergio has the sage drawn in, and the pointiness of his nose. Sometimes we see the sage with the droopy, cartoony nose, like we have over here. And then sometimes we see the sage with much more of a pointy nose. And here we've got one of those there. All right, let's check out one more Groo in the Epic Marvel run, and then we'll move on to Image Comics. Epic number 94. Another Sage mini-story. The Sage, ever vigilant. As I'm looking at the Sage here now, and I think as we see Sergio drawing Groo now, the characters are getting a little bit more squat. So it's almost as if the Sage's head from the tip of his beard to the top of his bun is the same size as we get for his body here. And then, of course, there's legs and feet underneath. This is peak Sage, in my opinion. He's looking good here. Right proportion of nose to head to bun. And for the most part, some nice looking wings, fluffy wings on that mustache. It's a good looking Sage here in issue 94. So that was 1992. This is 1995, almost halfway into the Image run. And in a story called A Little War, the Sage is dispensing his wisdom, at least to some children who will listen to the story. Look at him here. He's a happy-looking guy. He's got good teeth. 2 big puffs on either side of his mustache wings. Nice point down the middle. Some teeth. His cheeks look jolly and plump because of how Sergio is drawing the mustache. This is some good-looking Sage here. I don't know, a little bit funny looking. A little bit weird with that upper lip there as part of the mustache. I love this one. Look at Groo's silhouette there. He's having the time of his life. Here we come to the end. Looks like we've got short little legs on Mulch here. And the Sage's body size has increased to his head size. What does it look like? 1 head. It's a good 1.5 heads for the body and stuff here. Perhaps it's just that in this picture, the Sage, his head seems to be elevated off of his body. He must have a very long neck behind that head in this picture here. So in the Image comics, he's looking good. On to Dark Horse. Things are going to start changing in the Dark Horse era. 2007, 10 years since we last looked at the Sage. This is just a comic I chose because the Sage spends a lot of time in it. And I think what we're going to notice here is that Sergio actually is drawing, or at least inking, faster these days. The line isn't as thick, and the strokes are a little bit looser. I think the Sage has definitely lost his sausage nose at this point. It's got a little bit of a point. The bun on the top of his head, his man bun, is growing in diameter, I think, compared to his head. You know, he's getting older. His hair is growing. There's more of it up there. Let's find a nice big picture of the Sage. And we see that Sergio is using those monolithic blocks of teeth, not only for Groo, but also for the Sage here. Look at that big bun. Look at the angular lines. Has Sergio started using a pen with a nib to ink here as opposed to a brush pen? I'm really not an artist. Maybe somebody who knows better could tell me. And take a look at Sage's bottom lip here. Just integrated right into his beard. We can see his top lip represented by the line in his mustache. But look at that. 1, 2, 3, and the point. Classic Sage beard. I think in these days, a lot more of the definition, the shape of Sergio's characters, you have to give some more of the credit to Tom Luth coloring here. On the front part of the Sage's head here, there is no line designating the size, the shape of Sage's forehead and face. So Tom just has to come in here and say, okay, these are the colors. This is what's defining Sage's brow, Sage's skull. Same with over here. Behind the eyebrows and the eyelids, Tom's color defines the shape of the Sage's skull. It's really interesting to look at this kind of stuff and to see how important color is to the comic, to the character's representation. Really interesting stuff. I like that picture of the Sage. And I always like it when Sergio draws his characters in the distance and doesn't give them the full eyeball. He just gives them the dot treatment for the eyes. They look so cute. Look at the Sage's little dot eyes back there. All right, lastly, we're going to look at 2015's Friends and Foes series. This is issue number 6, of course, from Dark Horse Comics. Look at how on the cover here, Sergio has drawn, I guess, a bit of the hairline, almost like a line of latitude around the Sage's head. That's something we don't see too often, But again, follow from the tip of the nose to the back of the bun. You've almost got a line that you could turn the nose, the head, the bun around to create the volume of the sage's head. All right. Here's a nice, large, representative image of the sage. Again, we've got a little bit of that latitude line to show off the hairline. Looks like he's got a bit of an underbite with his mono block of teeth. The way that Sergio is drawing the fluff on either side of the sage's beard is changing a little bit. It's not as fluffy and cloudy, especially when he draws the shadows in here. It just doesn't seem to poof as much as it used to. And we're seeing the back side of the sage's neck as well. That could be a coloring thing. Pointy nose. In the last decade or two, we've seen the return to a lot more strands of hair in his man bun. His eyes are quite separated here. But there we go. This is a pretty good front-on version of the sage. He does have that nice sausage nose in this picture. The wings of that mustache, oh, they look like a bird about to take flight. Beautiful stuff. Still pretty puffy with a few tufts on the side. That mouth, though, just a little bit different, I think. Let's compare with back here in issue number 35, 1988. So almost 20 years earlier. Sage's beard is much wider, maybe not as long. Teeth defined, teeth not really defined. You can see that Sergio is trying to give an indication of a top row and a bottom row of teeth. Does it look to you like the bun size has increased? I don't know, maybe not, eh? But what beard looks more luxurious to you? I love the wings on the mustache, but this looks more pillowy soft. And you know, something that we didn't really talk about was his ear. Sometimes Sergio gives him a nice proper ear with some sideburns going over top of it. Sometimes Sergio draws a number 3 for his ear, and there's no sideburns. Maybe the sage gets a haircut every once in a while. Maybe that's why he has that hemispherical hairline. I'm not sure. But even when we look way back at the early sage, like that's a bean for an ear. And there's a number 3, just like we have over here. Depends on how he's drawn. You know, this is a feature image of the sage, so he gets a proper ear. Maybe just generally speaking, there's not enough time to draw wonderful round ears for the sage. The Sage Through the Ages. From a wild-eyed, scraggly mustached, wrinkly, long-legged, not-so-toothsome fellow back in 1982 to his cartoony peak 5 to 10 years later, and then eventually to a more refined, majestic old man in the 2000s and beyond. Aside from Rufferto and Groo himself, maybe the most important character in Sergio Aragonés' Groo the Wanderer comics, and quite an interesting evolution of drawing styles throughout the decades. Friends, I really hope that you've enjoyed taking a look at the Sage with me today. If you enjoy Groo the Wanderer comics and Sergio Aragonés as much as I do, I invite you to please subscribe to the channel and make sure you have notifications turned on, because I want you to be with me when I'm back very soon with another GrooTube. Take care, everyone. I think most of the time, Sergio just draws that mustache to cover up those ears. Oh, there's a number 3. Stop and enjoy the Groo fish.